Help us out.
Thank you so much, Jane. And it's a pleasure to be with all of you. And I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping details in terms of how we'll proceed with the session to help you feel comfortable and understand how we'll work together. So we are recording for colleagues who are unable to attend. And as a result, we are also configured for privacy. If you've just joined, you may wonder, am I the only person logged in? No, absolutely not. You're in great company. We just won't have visibility of all the colleagues. When you use the chat feature, which I hope you will, I encourage that throughout our time together. When you do that, I would love to bring in, with anonymity and a lot of paraphrasing, your ideas, your comments, any strategies that you're finding to be helpful, or any questions that you might have as we get toward the latter portion. I'm probably going to hold those questions so that we can pause the recording and have everybody feel comfortable asking a question. So when we are moving through the presentation, by all means, put in your questions early. If you have them, I can circle back and bring them to the forefront as we get to that latter portion. And we are also going to, with that chat feature, throw out a couple questions. So we hope that you will engage. If for some reason you're not comfortable and you want that chat kept perhaps between just the two of us, or between the panelists and me as the presenter, that's great. We totally respect it. Just type the word private and we'll know to not bring that in, even generically with paraphrasing. So that's perfectly acceptable as well. And if you have any follow-up questions, we're here to support you after the webinar as well, and make sure that you have any information that you might need. So my background, super quickly, is marriage and family therapy. So I have a 10-year career in that field, working mostly in community mental health and private practice. And beyond that, I have also facilitated on many health and wellness related topics over the past 20 years with regard to families and kids. And certainly this one is highly unprecedented as we think about the continued uncertainty as we launch forward into our future. So I know school is on the imminent horizon in the county, and wherever you're living in the surrounding areas, chances are it's going to be starting very soon. And there are a lot of decisions that are being made in really short time periods, and with a lot of questions remaining about how things might unfold in our future given this really unprecedented time. And so we do want to help to prepare ourselves and our family members for this future as it plays out. We want to understand that we do have a lot of choices, that we will be managing our emotions, and strategically we might be flexing quite a bit. And so we're building a lot of resiliency, and that is difficult to deal with more ongoing change. And we want to acknowledge that, and also talk about how to support kids through that, because they have a lot of emotions as well. So the key will be trying to embrace stability with flexibility. And where a lot of our choices might lie as parents is, how do we maintain consistent routines? How do we help proactively prepare not only ourselves but our kids for what is coming very quickly down the pike with education and all of our experience with returning to a new routine that we generally do at the end of summer and into the fall, but this will be a little bit different. We also want to recommend some best practices today and how to help us all prepare. So actually, I'm going to just back up and stay on the other slide for just a minute. Let's just stay here a moment, and I wanted us to do a quick little check-in. So when you think about your current stress level as you are anticipating this return to school and what that will mean for every aspect of family life, what is your stress level currently? So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, oh, I'm super relaxed, this is all working out, I have no concerns, I'm not worried, I'm not feeling much pressure or stress, that would be a low stress level. 10, on the other hand, would be very, very high. meaning I don't know how I'm going to be coping with this. I'm really struggling. So if you're comfortable putting in the chat, maybe what your number is on a 1 to 10, or if you're more comfortable just saying, well, I'm above a 5 or I'm below a 5. I don't know if anybody's going to go beyond 10, but feel free. So I'm really curious to find out how you're all doing. I realize that this is a snapshot of the moment and that it might have been different yesterday. It could be different tomorrow, but let's kind of just be present, be here now, and try to discern where we are in the process. And so, getting a lot of great comments in the chat already. Thank you for chiming in. Yeah, I don't think I'm seeing anybody below a 5. Oh, actually, we do have one person is actually coming in like kind of a 2 to 3 range. So that's interesting. I'm seeing many 7s, got some 8s, and I've got 5 to 6. So some are giving ranges. Oh, and we have a very specific 7.5. I love that. So thank you for checking in. Those of you who were comfortable doing that, I appreciate your engagement in the chat. And one person is, believing for the best, kind of hoping for the ideal scenario, but yet in reality, planning for the worst case scenario. And that is a really good depiction of what I think a lot of people are doing. Another person is really practicing already or working toward helping their child to wear that mask, and maybe more importantly, keep the mask on, right? And really work with that. So hats off that you are already approaching it in a way of helping kids to acclimate to the new school year. So I love these responses in the chat, very thoughtful. All right, my next suggestion is an activity that we can all do. And depending on the ages of our children, we can help them as well. When it comes to being worried about things and having a stress level around it, there's some research from stress management that has held the test of time since about the 1960s. And I happen to have done my master's thesis on stress. And so this is a statistic very near and dear to my heart. And I'll give you a quick story. About 25 years ago, I had a life change approaching, an experience that was going to be happening in my life. And as the months and the weeks and the days drew closer, I became increasingly stressed out about it, to the point where I would say I had symptoms in every facet of my being. I was not physically well. I'm pretty sure my immune system was not functioning highly. I had emotional roller coasters happening. I was not able to have a consistent nutrition plan. My appetite was all mixed up. My sleeping was off. My relationships at home were definitely affected. I was not as productive. I was very distracted mentally and having a hard time focusing. So all this to say, I was not in a good place. I think I was even having a crisis of faith. It was just very intense. And you know what happened? About 2 days before this event situation thing was to happen, nothing happened. It was pulled out of the universe as a complete non-event. And I don't know if anybody resonates with this, but I felt completely ripped off. I felt angry. I felt like I had let my mind and my emotions and everything just kind of run away to the worst possible case scenario, leaving me very ill-equipped in the event that it had happened to even cope with it. So I decided, it was a real watershed moment in my life, that, you know what, that's it. I'm never doing that again. I just knew within my being that it was affecting my health. And if I continued on that pattern, and if I went to that place every single time that I was anticipating a big change, it could compromise my longevity. And we do know from stress management research, it is connected with all of the chronic disease states. So immediately I recognized this is not going to be healthy long term. What can I do differently? So I went back to that research and I found that statistic again. And the statistic that I found was that 80% of the things that we worry about happening, 80% minimally, do not tend to happen the way we think they're going to happen. And yes, I'm saying there's a chance. So hear me on that. Yes, I'm acknowledging there is a chance, but the chance is very small. But that was enough for me, being kind of a chronic worrier at that time, to say, I'm very skeptical. Like, this sounds too good to be true. I can't really believe that there's an 80+% chance that something's going to work out, maybe even for better. And I was not open to that. So what I did was I proved it to myself. And this is the exercise that I recommend you complete as well. In fact, right now, if you have a piece of scratch paper, a notepad, doesn't have to be a journal book or anything fancy, grab it right now. And while you're on this webinar, naturally, you're going to have worrisome thoughts. You are human. You are hardwired to survive and to plan and to avoid danger, to attune to safety. That's how you are wired for a reason. I am too. Yet sometimes it can go into overdrive, and then we can actually kick into a fight or flight response for something that isn't happening yet or may not ever happen. And we really want to ask ourselves, is that going to help us? And so prove it to yourself as I did. Keep a list, a running tally. What are you worried about right now? And teach your kids to do this as well. It's really intriguing because the magic happens when you go back to the list later today, because there are things that you're worried about happening this afternoon, this evening, tomorrow, next Thursday, 5 weeks from now, 50 years from now. What if you were to go back to the list and do this consistently for a while? It may not take a long time for you to build confidence. It might take many days. It might take a few hours. It could take a month. I recommend that you do this exercise because you will prove it to yourself. And I haven't had anybody come back to me in about 25 years of presenting this activity who says, you know what, you were completely wrong. And in fact, they do come back, if at all, if they do the exercise, to say, you know what, it was even higher than 80%. And what it will do is help us to stay in a confident wait and see attitude. And when we build so much confidence and we really see that pattern playing out, then we can even take it a step further. We can develop a sense of inquisitiveness, curiosity around, I wonder how I am going to get that done, or I wonder how that is going to work itself out. This will be really intriguing to watch and see as we get closer. So it's a technique that has truly helped me to suspend the worry, to be able to do something concrete, to show myself that in fact things do tend to resolve themselves and work out. So I hope that that helps to get you started. So we will try to think towards the unknown and prepare as best we can. So one of the best practices of all is to be on a really good daily consistent routine. So even if you're not sure what's going to be happening at the start of the school year yet, depending on where you live and what's going on in your district, you can still get on a pretty good general schedule. So think about issues around what time will we need to be getting up? How will we structure meals and snacks? And I recommend even doing kind of a, with kids, they love to do this, kind of a mock school day, if you will, where we actually go through the routine and we maybe dress a certain way, we eat certain foods at certain times, and kids are so good and love to practice that. And I'm thinking toward younger kids, especially, maybe just launching into that first year of preschool or kindergarten, even packing a lunch for them, if that's how you do it with your school, opening the little packages and practicing how they're going to eat things in a certain time frame is something that can be rehearsed and anticipated. And it'll probably help all the teachers and staff too, if your kids are more comfortable with how it works. So practice that at home, if you will. And kids do beautifully with schedules. They like them often to be visual or printed out. Kids can also help create their own schedules. They can do that through writing and drawing. You can use timers and other cues in the environment. And I do recommend, if you are going to be registering, or if you are already, for perhaps virtual learning or e-learning, I know that there's a difference there, plan to have a designated space in the household where, and maybe they can do different things in different spaces. I know that can even help us as adults when we're in a certain area of our dwelling, we're doing certain things. And so practice that and maybe start right now, if school hasn't started already in your area, backing out the bedtime, trying to gravitate towards what will be a typical sleeping schedule. I know it can be a little bit difficult with, you know, how the sunlight's working right now in the end of summer, but as best you can, try to at least get the kids settled into their bedtime routine a little bit earlier and maybe back it up by 15 minutes. every evening over the course of perhaps a week, and that can help you start acclimating them towards that. That'll help you too. So hint, hint, adults need schedules as well. And be thinking about how you want to approach that. So these are just a few recommendations. Kids may be disappointed. We're going to talk about how to support them in their feelings. So we do want to try to help them anticipate what will be expected as much as we know right now and encourage them to be flexible. So one thing that I do like to do with kids is, and this can even work with older kids, asking open-ended questions and doing the what if game with kids. What if you're at school and you're needing to stay at a certain distance when you're walking in line through a hallway, if you're in-person school? What would you do if somebody gets too close to you? And help kids practice through role playing. And you could be the friend and you can actually act it out. Or what works really well with kids, especially, grade school younger, is to act it out with figurines or stuffed animals. And it can really help them practice and find their voice and learn how to speak up and learn how to ask people and ask for what they need and what they want, especially. So that's a great thing to do. So questions coming into the chat around what can we do with the middle school kids and the high school kids. If at all possible, this is kind of a wide landscape with regard to whether they're doing virtual learning, if they're doing e-learning, where they might be on Zoom with their classmates, their teachers. Encouraging them again to have really healthy habits and routines and set them up for success, help them talk about what's going to maintain their focus, how to help them organize their day, and structure in some breaks, and also schedule in times to do homework, times to maybe do Snapchat or FaceTime with their friends. Help them really think it through in terms of what their priorities are going to be. I do like to recommend a lot of touch points, especially with middle schoolers and high schoolers. Even if, let's say you're working, they're home doing e-learning, for example. I like to check in with my kids, and my oldest is already out of the home. My second child is also out of the home, but my youngest just finished his last year in high school. So he did do e-learning last year. And what I like to do is check in the morning. If I'm not in the household, if I've already gone, or let's say, he's still sleeping, I'll send a message or I'll write a note. One thing that's really fun to do in your households is to grab a dry erase marker and write notes on the bathroom mirror. I find that that's really fun for kids, and it cleans up really nicely with a little glass cleaner. It's super easy to clean up. It doesn't make too much of a mess. And your kids could write notes back to you. You could keep a journal book on the kitchen counter, a notebook where you write a message each morning. They come out, maybe get their own breakfast, and then they see the message. Or you can send a meme or a Bitmoji or a text if they're older and they have their cell phones. I like to also check in at the end of the school day, and then also at bedtime. Now, ideally, we want to do it in person if we can, but if not, let's think about how we can connect with kids and find out how they're doing. So there's a lot here around helping kids trying to anticipate what will be different. So talk them through different scenarios and have them think about, what would you do if you started the year in person, and then let's say you find out that you have been in a close contact with somebody who has COVID. What will happen? What will probably be the next step? So help them kind of think through and anticipate what the patterns might be, and that allows them to prepare. If your kids are going in person and they have not had a chance to actually do a dry run for commuting to school, that's a great idea to prepare them as well. And if they can get into the building to do a quick tour, I know some kids are transitioning from e-learning or virtual learning last year into a new building. Maybe they've moved into a new school or they've relocated. And so everything is new. So if you can schedule a tour, or if there's any kind of open house activities or any way to connect with other parents or other students, I would encourage that as well. I know it can be difficult socially to meet new friends, so maybe consider doing an activity together, going on a hike, or doing something that you can do that's fun for them and that they might enjoy. So anyway, we're going to keep talking about that. And oh, I love it. Somebody's sharing that one of their kids, younger children, will do like a note on the shower door. That's so sweet. Oh my gosh, how endearing. And one concern that's coming in the host is just the shortage of teachers and what's going to be happening with that. And so being worried about larger class sizes is also a topic of concern. So letting our kids know that the teachers are going to maybe have a higher volume of students and we may need to wait more patiently as a student to get our teachers' attention. What can we do to communicate better with our teachers? So that's a great aspect that is important to consider as well. Thanks for sharing that. Well, reassure kids the big reason, the big picture why. And even if they're not worried, we want to help develop compassion so that they understand that maybe they feel safe and comfortable with the current protocols, but not everybody feels that way, and that's okay. It's important that we all have our own feelings, that we acknowledge them, that we honor them, and we can learn to appreciate other people's feelings. We can learn to, by asking questions of kids. I wonder how your friend Juan is going to feel if this happens. So again, you can kind of preview and talk it through and have them get a little bit outside of themselves and start noticing other people's feelings and facial expressions. And one way that you can coach that is by responding to their emotions and helping them label them, noticing when they might be feeling angry or sad, and say things like, I'm seeing tears in your eyes and I'm wondering if you're feeling sad. And kids can correct the feeling if we guess the wrong one, especially middle schoolers and high schoolers. But often kids in the grade school years need a lot of help just putting words to their feelings. So if we can even reflect back with something like, it sounds like that's really worrying you, or it seems like you're really frustrated right now, or it looks like you're taking a lot of time to do this. So kids can get that reflection from us. We don't need to just jump right in and redirect them. Well, why don't you try this? Well, what if you did that? That's good. And that can come after we've allowed them to share the feeling and get a label for it, to feel the feeling. I know that one of the hardest things, just speaking personally, is when our kids' hearts are hurting, when they're in a place where they're struggling. It feels like our hearts are hurting right with them. And we often want to spare them of that emotional pain. And yet, how they develop their emotional intelligence and how they move through life has a lot to do with how they're allowed to have their feelings and experience them and feel them. I know it's really, really hard, but keep in mind that if we can come alongside of them with empathy and support them, that's the best approach in allowing them to work through their feelings and to channel them and to integrate them and figure out, what can I do with this feeling? So it's a beautiful strategy. So we do want to focus on a lot of positivity if we can, and really point out when our kids are being resilient. And with younger kids, especially if we think about leaving for work, perhaps to go to our working place, or maybe we're going to, if they're in person at school, drop them at the door. We might have to say something, depending on what they're sharing and what they're emoting. We might need to say something like, I'm hearing you, you don't want me to go. Um, Saying goodbye is really hard sometimes. I love you, and I'll see you after lunch, or I'll see you after school. And so being matter of fact and encouraging our kids and letting them know that they're loved and they're cared for is part of this process, but it can be very, very challenging. So if we're doing e-learning or virtual learning, if we're in that modality with kids at home, then we may at times need to have them understand that we need to focus on something, or we might even need a break because we've been helping them. And so we might have to speak up and assert our voice and say something like, I'm going to need a few minutes to go relax my body and to calm myself. I'm going to go into my space, my room, and you'll be safe in your room. And we'll set a timer, and I'll come back in 10 or 15 minutes and then we'll do XYZ. So just talking kids through and kind of previewing what the schedule will be and what the next steps are is very, very helpful. So tips on becoming more flexible involve maybe changing how we do things or even how often we do things. And it can be helpful to have sort of a household meeting and talk about the new schedule and how much time things are taking, and maybe have everybody decide what they're going to do to participate and help. And kids do love to help their families. The older set might grumble a little bit, but they do want to feel a sense of belonging and they do want to participate, and we all need help. And so it's important for them to understand that they're part of the family, part of the household, and we're all going to work on this together. So keep in mind about picking those battles and maybe letting some things be good enough if we're going to delegate them or let them go a little bit. We might even have to relax some of our standards in terms of how often we're doing a certain cleaning task, but we do want to make sure that we keep it a priority. Of course, hygiene and cleanliness is important to keep our health, but we may have to flex a bit in order to stay focused on the most important things first. So we're going to talk about a potential scenario. Transportation might be different. Perhaps space coverings will be required. Maybe they won't. Maybe we'll start that they are and then they aren't, or they aren't and then they are. So we just want to open up and help prepare kids and ourselves for all the different possibilities. When it comes to having their own supplies, kids will be discouraged, obviously, from sharing. So I would want to help kids practice or have a way of speaking up assertively and saying, it's not the healthiest for me to share my crayons, or maybe you're going to need to go talk to the student services office because we're not supposed to be sharing our pens, or you know just encourage kids to find a way to have an answer when other friends come to them and maybe need something. So just working through those scenarios will be part of the landscape as well, and then checking and following and staying in tune with the CDC guidelines, and obviously the school protocols will be important. So this is rather a moving target, so to speak, where it can be all in flux, and that is super challenging. Another potential reopening scenario could involve the fact that there won't be any outside activities. Sports might be limited. We may not be able to visit the school like we may have done a couple of years ago. Those reopening times can be staggered. And so it is really important to be sure to communicate with your leader about what's unfolding in each situation so that you can collaborate better through your workplace in terms of what is happening on the home front. I think that's really important to have those conversations with your leader, to open up, let them know what you're juggling and how everything is going. So we do want to just consider that it could be very, very different, and we want to prepare our kids, and they may be disappointed. In fact, I would expect that they will feel very disappointed in wanting to do more socially. And one struggle that's coming up for parents with kids who have more online activities is the kids are getting a lot of screen time. So if they're going to be doing e-learning or virtual learning, they're going to be on the screens a lot. And even if they're not, because they may not be able to interact as much with their friends socially or be involved in these extracurricular activities, they're going to want to spend more time on FaceTime or social media or doing virtual gaming, just a lot of different possibilities. So we may need to make our peace with that a little bit as parents and have some tech-free zones in the house. And I recommend also some tech-free times where perhaps we have kids charge their devices as they're winding down for the evening before they're going to bed in the kitchen, where it's kind of the community family charging central area. And that way they won't be on their screens in their rooms after hours when they should be and could be sleeping. And we may also want to understand that they may have to do more virtually in order to feel connected socially. And all of our kids are very different. Some of our kids may be quite introverted and they're really not missing a lot of the togetherness that they would have had. Others are craving it desperately. And so it's everyone in between as well. So we just want to open up and notice how kids are feeling and ask them some open-ended questions and then listen really, really well. And we'll talk about that. So it could be a continuation of what's happened in the past where kids are already adjusted and used to doing things more virtually or remotely. And so once again, we're going to revisit what worked well in the past year, if that was the case. Bring that back to the forefront, just as you would acclimate to any other routine that you do periodically through the year. So understand that it can take a little time to transition. So most of us, I think, have this sense that, well, we're just going to make a change and then by the following weekend, we'll all be adapted. We might want to build in a little more time and understand that we all have kind of our own unique timeline in terms of how we adjust mentally and physically and emotionally to the change. So I would expect that among different kids in our household, they would be perhaps on a little bit of a different timeline in terms of some may adapt more quickly than others. That's okay. Just want to acknowledge that and anticipate that might be the case. And just remember, if you feel like it's taking one child or one family member a little bit longer, that we're all working through it in a little bit of our own timeline, and we will get through it together. It's just that we might do it a little differently. So be prepared to include those spaces, those breaks, etc. So then there's alternate days in some form of a hybrid reopening, and this can be especially challenging. So once again, be communicating with your leadership in your workplace and try to have those touch points where you do connect with your kids. And often meal times are designed very nicely around that because we are together. And I like to often ask or do an activity around roses and thorns. I don't know if anybody's heard of this before, but asking about what went really well today. What did you like about today? And then what was challenging? What was difficult? What was your struggle today? And then you could even add in what I call buds. So you have roses, thorns, and buds. And buds have to do with what caught your interest today? What is something that you might like to explore more or learn more about? What are those things as well? So it's a great way to just kind of regroup, check in, and do it. It can often work well, especially in if you happen to be in a vehicle driving to do errands. That's a nice time to check in as well. Everybody's kind of captive, and as long as you can make sure they're off all the devices and the headphones, that can work beautifully too. So take those natural times when you are together and try to incorporate some discussion time. And I like to keep meals especially positive. So I personally in my family have been cognizant of avoiding really emotionally laden topics that might be very upsetting. Maybe keep that for an off the meal time because then sometimes it can affect people's appetite. So just a little bit to consider as you are having those times to gather. So if you've got tips for your situation that you want to share in the chat right now, bring them in. I'd love to share it with a larger group. And then we're going to start moving forward just a little bit more. So these are some questions that we can ask and help kids with. And then we do want to talk a little bit today about opening up around how we can listen better to each other. And we also want to live optimistically and recognize how much we have gone through already. We want to acknowledge that there's been hardship and there's been grief and loss and there's been a ton of change. There can even have been trauma and tragedy and difficulty and stretching way, way out of our comfort zone. And we want to acknowledge that for each other with admiration about how much we've done to get through. And then even look at some of the potential upsides that have happened and be mindful about other people and teaching our kids to look outwardly, maybe through volunteering or making a card or a picture for somebody, calling someone and chatting with them over FaceTime or over the phone. There's a lot that we can do to help kids focus on gratitude as well. and to even try some new things. And one thing that our family is doing is we're looking forward to, what do we want to bring from this past experience into the future? What can we do? And we're looking at incorporating some of those really good quality times that we had together that came from spending time together. And it tends for us to be around mealtime. So we're looking forward to the realities of, there may not be as many meal times together as we've had, but let's make the most of maybe the few meal times we have together where we're not all working or in school or doing something. How can we make the most of those times and make those special and make the best of it, given that it may not be ideal, it may not be perfect. So that's been something really useful about our family situation that might help yours as well. There is a component of fear and anxiety naturally, and we want to keep ahead of things like the credible sources for research and understanding what the recommended guidelines are and looking at what we do control. Where does our control lie? Well, in maintaining our health, in terms of finding a way to exercise, to move our bodies, even as a family or individually, and to support ourselves through good sleeping patterns and through good nutrition and hydration. These are all things that we do have a lot of influence over. And listening to each other, showing love and concern and sharing affection, those are things that we can focus upon that will help bolster us and strengthen us as we weather the ups and downs of the future and the ongoing uncertainty and the change that's coming. So I do recommend that. And then here's a few tips and strategies. I wanted to specifically mention the mindful breathing today. So let's all try this together, and you can teach it to your kids. Your kids may already know about it if they've done, especially the older kids, if they have apps or online tools that they've used for mindfulness, like Calm or Headspace or Happify. Those tools are available to help incorporate mindfulness, which is being present in the moment, connecting with our bodies and our breathing, using some mental imagery. And so these are things that kids can do, that adults can do as well. So let's practice the good deep breathing technique, which is what I call round breath technique. So I'd like for you to do this with me. And we're going to go in through the nose for about 3 to 4 seconds. Ready? Begin. Now we're going to hold it for about 3 to 4 seconds, and then we're going to exhale through the mouth with the whooshing sound, just like I did, for about 3 to 4 seconds. I recommend repeating that minimally 10 repetitions. And when you do the exhale breath, an added tip is to push out a little further. So just when you would normally take another in breath, just push out a little further, and then you might make a loud sound like that, which indicates that you are expanding your diaphragm more fully, creating a greater vacuum, bringing in more oxygen. And that will kickstart and give momentum to that deep breathing pattern so you can keep it going. Because one of the hallmarks of stressful breathing is holding the breath or just breathing from the chest. So we want to counterbalance that by breathing deeply. And it works really well if you close your eyes, and younger kids especially, or anybody, you can lay on your back and put a pillow on your tummy, or kids like to use stuffed animals or toys or dolls, figurines, and put that on their stomach and watch it rise up and down. They could even put a book on their stomach. So that's a great way to teach kids how to breathe more deeply. And the impact in the body is that the heart rate can lower, blood pressure can lower, metabolic rate can rebalance. You can bring in more oxygen to every cell, which will help your thinking. It'll give your body a sense of peacefulness and calm. And kids can also do one more thing, as well as adults and teens. And I recommend taking your hands out in front of you. I'm going to do this with the camera, and then just hook your thumbs together and bring your hands to your chest and comfort yourself. It's a self-soothing gesture that works really beautifully to help you feel more calm while you're doing the deep breathing. I personally love this one. I actually feel it. I don't know how it will go for you, but it's, again, something that we can incorporate to help us calm ourselves. But we have to believe that we deserve a break, that we are worthy of putting down the stress for a few moments to recenter ourselves. And that will help support our healthy immune systems as well. So we want to incorporate those kinds of techniques. And then you can also do mental imagery and teach kids to do it, where you bring in all five of your senses. So while you're closing your eyes, doing the deep breathing, holding your hands across your heart, your chest, you can imagine going to a place where you feel happy, safe, secure, and comfortable. And there are a lot of online tools that can support you with, podcasts and meditation, mental imagery, guided imagery situations that you can walk through and listen to as well with your technology. But you can do it for yourself in a short time while you're doing the 10 good deep breaths. And what that involves for me is, for example, I like to go to a tropical beach. I live in the Midwest, so I really wish I was in Pinellas County many times and that I could get to a beach faster. So when I go to the beach, I imagine the visual first and foremost. So I bring in that sense where I'm noticing the waves rolling up on the shore. I'm seeing beautiful blue water, blue sky, fluffy clouds, beautiful sun, palm fronds swaying in the breeze. Then I add sound. Now I'm adding in the sound of the seabirds, the sound of the waves rhythmically rolling up and retreating on the shore. Also, now I can hear the sound of the breeze in my ears and the palm fronds swaying in the breeze. Then I'll go to my kinesthetic sense, and I love to have my toes in the wet sand with a tiny little wave rolling over the tops of my feet with the sun soaking in. And from that point, I'll bring in my sense of smell. Now I'm smelling the salty air. I'm perhaps smelling food from a nearby restaurant, high sun protection factor lotion on my skin, and then I finally top it off with a taste sense. So I'm going to sip on a really cool tropical beverage, flavors exploding in my mouth. And that's how I bring it all together in a mindfulness, really only 1 to 2 minutes. And that goes such a long way to helping us calm our fear and anxiety. Also, journaling, writing things down and then going back and reading it changes our perspective. It's like taking a kaleidoscope and seeing a beautiful picture and then rotating it 90 degrees until the shapes fall into a new picture. We become an observer and it changes our perspective. So you can encourage kids to do writing as well and then go back and read what they wrote. It's amazing. So just a few other tips here around watching something funny, taking a break, taking a walk. And so I just want to put up the last slide in case you need to log off, but I'd love to shift over and begin opening up for any Q&A that we might have, or just questions and comments. And maybe while you're getting your questions ready, before I pause the recording, I do have a few additional listening techniques that I think will help you and your kids of all ages. It'll also help you with anybody virtually if you're collaborating with other family members or caregivers, or communicating with the teachers as well. And so the first technique I recommend is listening very deeply by adding in a couple extra seconds of silence. So after somebody has finished speaking, just pause in your brain and tell yourself 1001, 1002. When you do that, what happens for the person who's being listened to is it feels like you have all the time in the world for them, and as if you're very patient and you want to hear more. So just that silence can often encourage people or even compel them to say a little bit more. Sometimes, let's face it, in the Western culture especially, silence can be a little uncomfortable. And so people try to fill it. And that's a way to encourage someone to say a little bit more, that I'm here for you, I'm willing to listen. So it takes some discipline and some practice, but it is a great, great strategy. And then if emotions get a little bit heightened or escalated, where the other person maybe starts getting more emotional, perhaps they start talking a little louder, a little faster, a little higher pitch, you can counterbalance that and, in fact, mirror a quieter voice tone by using what I call your late night FM DJ voice. So if you consciously bring your voice down a little bit, slow it just a tiny bit, it can help them to kind of recalibrate their emotions as well as their voice. And then it will tend to be quieter instead of becoming a shouting match, which I think I've been in a few of those, unfortunately. And so, next thing that you can do, remember, is to, if you have somebody who, a child, for example, who is quieter, or they just don't offer a lot of words, you can take maybe the last 1 to 2 to 3 words that they have said, just repeat it back verbatim with an upward inflection in your voice as if you're asking a question. So, for example, if your teen says, "Oh, I'm just so stressed out," you can simply say, "Stressed out?" or "So stressed out?" And then with that upward inflection, follow it with that silence that we just talked about. And you'll be amazed at how, as you're building that good listening relationship, you're building more trust, you're letting them know, "I really care about you and I want to hear," they'll probably tell you a little bit more. You can do that repeatedly with somebody who doesn't use a lot of words, and that can help draw them out so that then you can begin helping them label their feelings, saying things like, again, "Sounds like, it looks like, it seems like." So what I'm suggesting here is that you slow down the interaction, that instead of trying to redirect your kid or distract them from their feeling or make a suggestion, "Let's go do this," which is fine. We've all done that. We can all do that. Try staying with it and see what happens. So once the child has felt, whatever their age, once they felt heard and understood, they'll either correct you if you guess the wrong feeling, or they'll kind of go, "Yeah, that's right," or "Yeah, that's it." Then you know you've accomplished that. And from that point, now you can begin opening up to a question, a how, a what, a where, a when question, something that they can't answer with yes or no. And stay with it. Practice this, do it repeatedly. It may not go well the first time, but try it as a strategy. How might we get through this together? Or what would help you right now? What do you need to manage this problem right now? Just talk with your kids and ask them. And what will happen is it can move them from the emotional part of the brain back to the thinking part of the brain, because it opens up possibilities and solutions. So that would be the next strategy to help move it to, what are we going to do about it? And you're going to help them with that. And so they often have an idea of what they really need and what would support them best. And so start with that and take it from there. And then if you feel that you need additional support, reach to the employee assistance program. Consider reaching to a trusted professional, somebody who can come alongside and help you as a parent to support your child. So I highly recommend that. And remember, when you do that, the county won't have any identifying information that you've connected with your employee assistance program, either online or by a phone call. So it's confidential for you. And I want you to really lean into that if needed. It's so amazing. And personally, as a marriage and family therapist, you might think this is ironic, but it makes sense to me. I often need the most help with my own marriage and family. Just because I'm trained professionally doesn't mean that I don't need help, because I'm in it emotionally. I'm part of the patterns that are going on. And I often need an outside voice to help me figure out what I can do differently. And so I just want to encourage that, if that would be helpful. So are there any questions at all? I'm circling back to the chat and making sure that we haven't missed anything, or any tips or ideas that you would like to share. While you might be typing, I'm going to pause this recording